Sorry for the delays. Sorry for the time changes, but we're here. NFL DFS picks, lineup advice, FanDuel, DraftKings, NFL Yahoo, DFS picks, divisional round. You name it, we're here. 4-gamer, 2-gamer, showdown. We're here to help you out. Normally we do these pre-recorded videos. Had some tech issues this morning, but you know what? We're here. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. You know Jack, owner of DFS Magic, creator of the lineup builder at Occupy Fantasy. Jack, you're joining us not from your usual spot, so thanks for tuning in, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Tuning in from Minnesota, super cold here. Yeah, rocking some hotel internet Discord challenges that we worked out, and excited to be able to talk about this slate finally.
And that's not even including all the ownership and model and builder issues we had early this morning. The joys of a 4-gamer on one site and 2 gamers on all the other sites. So again, we're here for about 30 minutes or so. If you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. Jack and I will happily answer them. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you are. Get notified when we go live, upload any new videos. Again, being subscribed is a great feature. When we do have time changes like this, you'll be notified immediately. So make sure you do that. Give us a thumbs up. Any questions, throw them in the chat. And I know this is an inconvenient time for the NFL DFS Q&A, so I'll be in Discord all weekend, and so will the rest of the Occupy Fantasy staff for any pregame or late swap questions. So, Jack, let's get into it. Let's start with the 4-gamer because, I mean, honestly, that's where your success started, right? The old Mitch Trubisky wildcard playoff slate, the 50K winner, your first big score, was a 4-game slate with late swap. And talk to me about that really quickly. Because we've talked about it before, but just your first big win there, what the 4-game slate strategy was then, and if it's changed any to now.
Yeah, I mean, back then it was a 20 max. I think the biggest takeaway from then is I played all the quarterbacks, at least one lineup each, and I think we often have our universal strategy of finding the leverage spots, and I think we see that when we get into the games here is that there are some pretty heavily owned quarterbacks, understandably so, but that opens up some leverage opportunities. So yeah, I mean, Trubisky was a low-owned quarterback. I think we're going to be able to point to some low-owned quarterbacks in good spots. And then the other thing, like you mentioned, late swap is even more important with the 4-gamer, and you have more chances to do it, right? You can kind of take tonight and look at your lineups and make some initial decisions, or at least think about what you might want to do. And then obviously you have the one final time to do it, before the final game tomorrow.
And that final game's a doozy. We got Kansas City and Buffalo closing out the show, so it's going to be a lot of late swap decisions. And the nice thing is the games tomorrow don't start until 3 p.m. Eastern, so you have time to get some 2-game lineups in, some showdown game lineups in, and plenty enough time to make your late swaps and review after the first 2 games on Saturday are done. From a stacking perspective, Jack, we've talked about the 2-gamers, right? We want a mega stack, but it feels like for 4 games, that's probably the size where we're reverting back to our classic strategy for the regular size main slates of 3x1, maybe 3x2 stacking, right?
Yeah, I think so. My Trubisky one was a 2x1. He's kind of a running quarterback, so that helped. But yeah, I think I agree with you. More lean toward the main slate approach. I think to your guys' point of always emphasizing game stacks, I think it's really imperative that you do have the run back. And I don't think you want to be playing sort of those naked 2x0, 3x0 ones if the field is going to do that, right? But I think that game stacking correlation is really really important.
Yeah, especially with this slate, right? If we look at the plug here, let me scroll down a bit on the plug, and you look at the biggest favorites, right? Sometimes we'll have favorites of 10 or more points, but we are in the divisional round, which means the biggest favorite on the slate is just 5.5 points, which means, Jack, that's generally run back territory. Once we get double digits, that's when we start to consider the 2-0s, 3-0s, 4-0 type stacks.
Absolutely. I think it might be good to just quickly, we could talk about each game a little bit while we wait for questions to roll in, and just kind of like spread, weather, I don't know, any other kind of stuff if you want to go there.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. I do see we have a couple questions in the chat, so let's answer those really quickly.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So Totally Not the FBI says, who are you most scared of fading for the Saturday-only slate? I mean, there's got to be one answer, right? It's got to be Derrick Henry.
Yeah. I mean, that's an ownership projection that, we have him pretty high, but right, I don't think it would be shocking if we saw him go 65% owned, right?
Especially since we just got word from Diana Rossini that he will not be on a snap count or pitch count or any limitations today, which, again, there's a lot of rust to knock off with a foot injury. But again, if there's one person that is scary to fade, it is Derrick Henry. So
On the flip side, top occupy mile quarterback is Ryan Tannehill. I mean, it sounds kind of gross, right? But as we know, if you can get a little bit of touchdown variance and get some passing scores, that could be an easy pivot for people if you have the courage to play Ryan Tannehill.
absolutely. We got a question from Goat here. It says 100-player leagues and below best plays. For 100-player contest, Jack, we're still 3-1 stacking, maybe 3-2 stacking on the 4-game slate, even more stacking on the 2-game slate. And I guess the best plays probably would be these high volume running backs and then guys like Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, right?
Yeah, I think you usually talk about the small field, right? You generally play chalk and higher owned guys, and then you kind of look for maybe one spot to get a little different. And perhaps even just your stack by nature will be unique in that small of a contest.
Exactly. All right, Tom has a question here. It's going to require a little bit of thinking here, Jack. So I'm going to ask the question, let you look it up for a second, and I'm going to answer one of these other questions myself. So Tom asks, which chalk is the biggest fade of the weekend? So take a second, think about that. While Scott asks, I'm in a fantasy league where there's multipliers. Do you do videos on those? No, we do not specifically, but if you have a specific question, ask it, and we'll try to answer it to the best of our ability here. So appreciate you tuning in, Scott. So Jack, any thoughts on the biggest chalk fade of the weekend?
So we're talking the highest owned player that we are interested in fading.
Yes.
Is that my understanding the question
Yep,
correctly?
yep.
Oh man, I mean Henry's kind of interesting. Again, it just seems like kind of an uncertain situation. We don't know how he'll respond. We don't actually know if he'll be honest. I mean, I know they said there's no snap count. The other one's probably, we have Fournette projected pretty high just because he's cheap. But I mean that one is another one where he's kind of uncertain, and man, I'm gonna get fired for this one. But I mean, Cooper Kupp. The reason I say it is if you just look at the prices and ownerships of the receivers, Brian, we talked about this before the show started, but Tyreek Hill is like 6,600 on DraftKings, AJ Brown 6,200, Mike Evans 6,800. Stephon Diggs, 6,500. All these guys projected under 30% ownership. It wouldn't shock me if one of them dips to the teens. Meanwhile, Cooper Kupp's going to be, his standard whatever gaudy ownership, right? And he's 2K more expensive than those guys. What are your thoughts on that one as a pivot, looking at those other really high ceiling receivers that could probably outscore him?
I mean, you would think at this point in the season, and we kind of saw it last week, right? Maybe teams in the playoffs, with all the good teams remaining, will try to finally stop Cooper Kupp and force other players on the Rams to beat them. And I agree, if you can save 2K on a slate like this, it's pretty important. And all those guys that you just mentioned could be the highest score on the slate. So I think being underweight on Kupp isn't a bad idea on the 4-game slate. All right, so a couple questions here about backfield injuries, and we should talk about these because we have two situations in particular outside of Derrick Henry, right? Obviously, we have those concerns, but Kansas City and Tampa Bay. You mentioned Fournette for a second. Let's start there. Fournette likely to be activated by 4 p.m. today. We'll know officially. It sounds like he's all systems go. However, he's coming off a hamstring injury. Gio Bernard, Keyshawn Vaughn played admirably in his absence last week. So I mean, if you look at any industry site, if you look at ownership projections, you look at most any projections, Fournette rates really highly for his price, and he's going to be very popular. But Jack, I got to say, there's definitely some risk there coming off his injury and the potential for this to be a pretty split backfield.
There is, and we've seen them give Gio some good run, and he looked good, right? I thought he looked actually pretty explosive. So, if Fournette is dipping into anything like even a 60-40 share, I'm probably not that interested in at least like single entry 3 max kind of things. The other thing maybe we should talk about is just the injuries in that game with the offensive line and the defensive line matchups for Tampa Bay. Could be pretty tough for them to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, so let's go on to the injuries here on the Daily Plug, right? So Andrew Whitworth for the Rams side is out, which they do have a guy who's played a decent amount of snaps in his absences this year. But again, Andrew Whitworth, veteran stalwart across that offensive line against a ferocious pass rush in Tampa Bay. That's some issues. And then obviously Ryan Jensen dealing with that ankle sprain against Aaron Donald. That is not ideal for anyone healthy, let alone injured. And Tristan Wirfs, their left tackle, I mean, he's very questionable. If you watch the video of him returning to practice on Friday, and if you just watched him last week, I mean, it's going to be tough for him to be 100%. He won't be at 100%. So you have two pretty significant offensive linemen that are banged up. that makes it tough for Tampa Bay's offense in general. So, I mean, you add that to the fact. To me, I think the play is to go under on Fournette no matter what raw projections are telling you.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you did a great job outlining the injuries. I'll be curious since at the Sunday game if we see any action on the under, dropping that spread down. It just feels like it should. I mean, because these quarterbacks are both just statues that are amazing if they could stand in their spot, but if you make them move, they're kind of the play is almost over most of the time. So,
Yep.
yeah, and the other point you made about the offensive line injuries, if Tampa Bay can't run and they're just throwing a lot, that might be more Gio, right? We've seen them giving him the
Yes.
third down back. So just a lot of uncertainty there.
Exactly. And the other uncertain situation is this Kansas City backfield because Jerick McKinnon looked incredible last week. Just the ultimate point of the running backs don't matter movement, right? So CEH is expected back. Darrell Williams hasn't really practiced this week. Doesn't sound like he's going to play. If he does, I mean, he's probably going to be behind these other two. But, CEH, McKinnon are priced pretty similarly on all slates, showdown, 2-game, 4-game. And they're not cheap. I guess McKinnon's a little cheap on DraftKings. But how are you handling that situation? Because it is the last game of the weekend, and there are a lot of different ways that backfield could be split.
Yeah, I think my general idea is probably just to eat that one and play into both. I mean, given that it's the highest total on the game or the slate, I think they both could get there. Kansas City obviously shows more of an effort this year to run the ball. We don't have ownership quite so high on those guys. Honestly, I think the fact that it's a game, the final game, is probably an impact of that too. Like people just kind of want to set and forget, so they don't want to deal with it. But I think you bring up a great point with the multiple options. There is playing into those guys can let you have some late swap maneuverability tomorrow as well.
Absolutely. And, I think Chris, he just updated the plug. And as you see here in blue on screen, I think it's a really smart idea where CEH is a little more expensive. So put CEH in your lineup if you're interested in that Kansas City backfield. Then just monitor pregame reports. If Jerick McKinnon's running with the ones or we get any type of concrete report, you'll have the salary to swap down or continue with CEH. So I think that's a really sharp idea. So let's see. We got some questions here in the chat. We're here till 11:15 a.m. Eastern. If you have any more questions, throw them in the chat. We'll answer them here for you. Okay, Junior says, I know anything goes on smaller slates, but is it negative EV to play Henry with Tannehill and Tennessee wide receivers? So I'm assuming he's talking about the 2-game slate, but Jack, what do you think about a Tannehill kind of mega stack here with him, Henry, and one of either AJB or Julio?
I think it's absolutely fair game in a 2-gamer. Probably even okay in the 4-gamer, maybe a little thinner. But Henry gets some receiving work. But really, all that means on the 2-gamer, right, Brian, is that Tennessee would have to score the most points on the slate, which I think is a very possible thing that could happen today.
I absolutely think that could happen. Let's see here. Reeve says thoughts on best plays on DraftKings Showdown today for both games. Jack, I don't know if you've looked at Showdown too much. Reeve, we do have Showdown specific sections in the plug that you see on screen here at OccupyFantasy.com. So go check that out. But I'll give you a quick high level. The best plays are going to be the guys you know of the most, right? Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, A.J. Brown, the Cincinnati wide receivers. For the Cincinnati and Tennessee game, Jeff Swaim and the kickers are going to be popular plays. We like Westbrook-Akina a lot as a value and a low-owned play there. He's had a role change, so keep that in mind. And then for San Francisco and Green Bay, everyone's going to play Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers in Showdown. They're going to do whatever they can to get those guys in there. So that means some of these super gross plays at receiver and some of these lower salary guys. Jack, I guess that's a good transition into the Randall Cobb return and MVS being out for Green Bay. You're a Green Bay homer, so how do you see the snaps shaking out behind Devontae Adams?
Yeah, I think it's definitely Lazard for the most part, but we've seen Cobb get some red zone and certainly maybe more of a third down underneath guy. I think you just kind of have to play into both guys. Just recognize that Lazard typically gets the ownership in this spot we've seen, so I would probably treat Cobb as like a lower owned player, and if I play Lazard, just recognize that that's not going to be different, right? You're going to have to do something else. I did actually run in all of our other ownership stuff. I did run the ownership for Cincinnati, Tennessee, so that's in the builder right now, and we can do it for tonight as well. So I think value's pretty gross in that one on FanDuel.
Yes.
It's just a lot of expensive guys. Probably a good slate to play quarterback. Ryan Tannehill or Joe Mixon because the field's going to go Joe Burrow, Derrick Henry, right? So just kind of pivot off of that. Yeah, I think you hit on the head with tonight. It's going to be the Adams Rogers show. Probably hits, but you can get different with some lower owned guys. Maybe Mercedes Lewis, maybe Equinemius St. Brown, something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so Dot Bets asks, on the 4-game slate, late swap's going to be key, right? We hit it on the top of the show, but maybe Jack just, okay, today's games go off Sunday morning. You're sitting down, you're getting ready for your flight tomorrow, right? You're looking at your lineups. What are things you're looking for with 2 games on the books already and 2 more left to play for your large field or small field contest when thinking about late swaps?
It's really tedious. I know you've been there with me. Is you just kind of have to scroll through the leaderboard and try to find. You find your best lineup with the most minutes remaining generally, and it's kind of a judgment call. But you can just kind of tell, right? Like if everyone in your lineup has done pretty well, that's a good place to start. Like no like zeros or 2-point guys or anything, and then you kind of just look at the leaderboard and try to find people that are ahead of you or maybe not ahead of you, which would be the best case, that have the same or more minutes remaining. And that tells you like whether you need to play chalk or play something crazy. So if you find yourself like I have the highest points for 3 players remaining, that means you're in a really good spot and you can probably just play the chalkiest, highest floor guys. But if you find people above you, that's when you want to make sure you don't just play those guys because you're gonna be dead. Someone's gonna have those players. I'm sure you've been there with me scrolling through those leaderboards
Every week, man. Every week. And the key thing is the ownership and what ownership in your lineup has already played. So, like, when we have these lineups that we're building, there's always some sort of low owned element to them, whether it's 1 or 2 players below 20% or whatever metrics you set for your own lineups, whatever rules. And so, when you're checking, if all the players that have played in your lineup so far are chalky and have done well, then you still need to keep those low-owned elements. But if a couple low-owned elements have already played in a specific lineup and they've gone off, that means you don't have to take on any more risk than is necessary. So you can swap to the chalkier players, especially if, like Jack said, the rest of your lineup is pretty perfect. So just keep that in mind. I think that's the best piece of advice, Dot Bets. Let's see. All right, so the pricing is kind of soft, right? And Ed's asking about the 4-gamer. Which game, so Jack, I know you're more funneled on your quarterback exposures, but which games are you thinking about fading completely from a passing game perspective on the 4-gamer?
Oh man, that's tough. I'll let you start with that one. I think I need to think about it for a minute. Maybe I'll just copy you.
I mean, I think Green Bay and San Francisco. Obviously, fading Rodgers is pretty scary. But I think the cold weather, the total's dropping a little bit. San Francisco could control the clock a little bit, less plays overall. So I think that's where I would lean. The other one, honestly, despite how much I liked it a couple of days ago, with these offensive line injuries, I think Tampa Bay and LA, from a quarterback perspective, might be safe to fade. Obviously, you still want to play Cup and maybe Evans or Gronk or those guys. But a full passing game fade, I think, in the late game tonight, and then a quarterback fade in the Tampa game tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. I agree with what you said, and I think I'll go back to what I talked about earlier with I'm going to say just wide receiver mispricing. I think where I want to start is those 6,000 priced receivers that, like you said, could easily be the highest score on the entire slate. So Hill, Diggs, Brown, Evans. Evans maybe a little thinner with the offensive line injury, but definitely Hill, Diggs, and Brown. I mean, those guys don't really have any impediments to why they couldn't be the highest score on the slate. They're too cheap. So by playing into those guys, I'm probably gonna end up being under on Devontae, like you said, on Cup, like I said. Debo, yeah, I mean, yes, he could get there. He probably needs to score a couple times just because he's not, Brian, he's not really a high volume receiver, right? We're kind of counting on him to make the most of his touches and get in the end zone to be optimal at that price.
Yeah, and he's basically doing that every single game, so it makes it tough when he's scoring 20-yard touchdowns at an insane pace. All right, another question here. 4-game slate, flexing, wide receiver, running backs, tight ends. We're leaving out tight ends. Jack, you and I were discussing before we went live. Still think you can include tight ends on the slate because of the quality of the tight ends and just some of the value they provide. And again, it's not a full main slate where they can get priced out really easily.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just looking at DraftKings, I mean, 5,800 for Gronk. He's probably getting 10 targets. Kittle, 5,300. A little bit lower floor, but as high upside as any of the tight ends. Kelsey is a wide receiver, so that's never a problem. I think I'm very comfortable playing double tight end here. The field's going to do it, and it's not a bad idea.
For sure. All right, question about Julio Jones. He's been a hot topic in our Discord the last couple of days. Where do you see his ownership checking in, Jack? And what is your thoughts on playing Julio on any of the 4-game or 2-game slates?
I don't think I've ever been excited about Julio Jones this year.
I
Uh,
feel you,
I,
dude.
I was not going to think about playing him very much, maybe outside, unless I'm doing game stacks. Do you have any lean why he might, do better this week, or any beat writers talking about health or anything?
No, I mean, it's just the normal. He's healthy now, right? Really stay healthy during the game. He projects pretty well from like a raw projection standpoint, so I get it. But again, I think there are much better plays on the slate for me personally. So, all right. We got a question here. A common theme is teams using bigger running backs in cold weather. Another theme is teams leaning on their stars in the playoffs. In regards to the Packers' backfield, how do you see that split shaking out, Jack? And then on the 2-gamer say, could you see a possible optimal lineup where we see both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon?
Showdown, yes. Two gamer, maybe. I mean, like you said, the weather and the total dropping. Probably they're going to try to run more than you would think. And I know people like to say like, oh, San Francisco, top run defense, bad pass defense, but that the Packers are a good running team. Jones did pretty well the first time they played San Francisco, so I think Aaron Jones is a great play. Just on the 2-gamer especially, and Showdown. Can they get there in the same lineup? The 2-gamer, it's probably a little thin for me. Would you go there?
Ooh, I was thinking about it. I was looking at it today, and I guess it could be possible. But so you got to figure they have to outscore or like come close to outscoring Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry and Elijah Mitchell, and I guess that's possible. I don't know if I'd do it though. I think there's too many other good running backs on the slate. Maybe I always think about this too, right? If you play two guys from the same team, is it more likely that 3 running backs are in the optimal, or is it more likely those are the only 2 running backs that end up in it? To me, I think it makes sense if you play both that there's probably a third running back also that ends up there.
I can see that. Yeah.
Okay. Question about underperforming wide receivers. The only one we have on the list for this week is Gabriel Davis. Tyreek Hill just missed, but Gabriel Davis is the guy. Split snaps basically with Emmanuel Sanders last week, so Gabe Davis still a guy to target at a cheaper price. Brandon's asking about tight end in the flex. Yeah, Brandon, we just answered it. Yeah, you can play tight end in the flex. I wouldn't necessarily go target it, but it's not a bad idea this week. All right, Jack. I think we hit most of the topics. Anything we haven't talked about just yet that's bugging you for your lineups?
Let's see. Anything with the weather we need to be worried about this week that you think, or is it all pretty standard?
I think it's pretty standard. Again, it's going to be relatively cold in Green Bay, 10 degrees at kickoff, but that hasn't deterred them before. The total has dropped a little bit in that game, but that could be unrelated to the weather, so I wouldn't let weather dictate any decisions this week. Okay, question about Tampa Bay wide receivers here in the chat. We haven't really talked about this. So Mike Evans, obviously the stud number 1 wide receiver. I don't know if they'll shadow him with Jalen Ramsey. I'm sure Ramsey will match up with him a lot, but there is some opportunity for the rest of these guys. Brashad Perriman is out. Cyril Grayson is technically questionable, but if you go back to Week 18, he hurt his hamstring immediately. Was ruled out for the game. That's a bad sign. Didn't practice all week. It's another bad sign. He missed last week's wild card matchup. Now, generally, a hamstring injury that requires you to miss the entire game and not practice the week following generally takes 2 weeks of at least limited practice to get back into the game. He's barely practiced this week. He got in practice on Friday. I don't see him playing. I feel like we'll see John Brown called up from the practice squad today, which means it's going to be Tyler Johnson at number 2 receiver, and probably Scotty Miller is the wide receiver 3. Jack, I don't know if you have anything else to add or if your opinion differs from what I just laid out.
No, I think it's pretty gross, and I mean, to me, this seems like a Gronk game just because we know the Rams are weak at linebacker relatively to their corners. They lost the really good safety to injury. Scotty Miller versus Rams typically play pretty soft coverage. They're not giving up a lot of like 50-yard bomb plays. So I just think the whole receiver room outside of Evans is pretty gross, and I probably wouldn't start there for value plays.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, again, it's a tough matchup for them, and I like the value there, but I just don't know. I don't necessarily know if we need it. But anyways, to answer the question in the chat, between Cyril Grayson and Scotty Miller, I don't think Cyril Grayson will be active, so Scotty Miller is the answer there. But we'll know today. If you see John Brown get called up by 4 p.m., then we'll know that Cyril Grayson's probably out. So, all right, Jack, if you have a single lineup to build, you got a ticket to a big contest this weekend, 4-gamer on DraftKings. Just gut first thought. Which game, which quarterback are you stacking?
I'm going Cincinnati, Tennessee for sure. I think we talked about that. Just single digit quarterback ownership. Burrow may tick up a little bit on that, but it just seems like an under-owned game for the upside. And I think I would play AJ Brown in that lineup. Again, I think all the excitement over Henry. AJ Brown's 6,200 on DraftKings, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, we saw a game, whatever, when he came back from injury, where he had like 15 catches and just completely destroyed, that game. So, I mean, I think I'm starting there. And whether you want to go super crazy and play Tannehill or play Burrow with AJ Brown run back, either one would be pretty strong to me. What about you?
I mean, you're talking me into it, man. I got a ticket in the 4-4-4-4 this week, and that's looking pretty good to me. Again, like I said, my initial lean was the LA Tampa Bay game, but these offensive line injuries are really scaring me.
200. I mean,
yeah, man.
Like, I'm just like, Tyler Boyd is 5,000. Like, that just doesn't.
It's a good comparison. Yeah. Any lean on Higgins or Chase in that lineup?
I'm just make it for you and send it to you after
the
show.
just do me the favor, make it. I'll give you a little cut, and then that'll make it a lot easier on me for sure. So
I don't. I mean, either one's probably fine. I need to look at Tennessee has some bad corners, right? I need to look if they shadow or if they just play sides, and I don't know. I have to look for that one. But
ideally, Cincinnati does air it out, right? Just let Burrow keep cooking in this game. It's what's got him this far. So
yeah, I tell you what, man. I think Burrow, Chase, Brown is a pretty sick four. Like, people, you're getting unique by not playing Henry as the run back, because like probably most people are going to do that.
Right.
Super high ceiling, not that expensive. I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty strong if I was doing one lineup.
All right, man. Your commission check will be in the mail if I hit the million this week. All right, guys. We got 3 minutes left here. Any final questions? Let's get them in the chat. Let's rapid fire this. Again, we'll be in the Discord server all weekend. At least I will be, and I'm sure other OccupyFantasy.com staff will be. If you have any pregame questions or any late swap questions, happy to answer them. So make sure you join our Discord server. Click the join button below this video and chat with other members of the OccupyFantasy.com community. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when we go live, upload any new videos here on YouTube. Give us that thumbs up if you like the NFL content. And you can always, if you're watching this replay, I don't know how much it's going to help you, but you can always comment on the video and we'll try to answer those questions as well. All right, the daily plug is up, OccupyFantasy.com. That's what you see on screen here. It has lineup-specific strategies for each contest type on FanDuel and DraftKings, 2-game or 4-game. We have showdown-specific notes, the best values, the best pivots, what the field is going to do, how you can leverage the field against themselves in those contests, satellites to target, top plays ranked. The Occupy model has ownership projections for the 4-gamer, 2-gamer, and showdown slates. Everything you need to crush this weekend's games. UFC, big pay-per-view event tonight. Jake and I did a video. That's up here on YouTube. The plug is up. The model's up. Lots of sweating to do this weekend. Question, any exposure to Deontay Foreman or Hilliard in GPPs? Jack, I don't know about you, but I think it's either Henry or fade.
Yeah, I'm with you. They're going to probably give him all the carries. So,
any leans on defenses, one way or the other, where you're going to go heavy, or is it more of just a spread out allocation for you this week?
Yeah, probably just spread. I mean, I think, like we talked about with the offensive line injuries to Tampa and LA, and like they're generally offenses that want to pass and they have poor blocking and they're playing against elite defensive line. So I like that one as a starting place. But yeah, I'm with you. You just even it out when in doubt. Bills, Chiefs, they're going to be zero own defenses because who wants to play a defense against Allen or Mahomes? But we've seen them both have some pretty bad games turnover wise. So I don't mind those in games as well.
I mean, I love those defenses for the 4-gamer too, but especially on the 2-gamer and in showdown, I love playing Bills or Chiefs defense for those reasons you just mentioned. So, all right, final minute. Jack, who you got coming out of this week's games to meet in the conference championship next week?
Oh man, just pick'ems, huh?
Yeah.
I think Rams. I just think there's too many injuries for Tampa Bay. I'm a Packer fan, so I'm so sick of reading all this like San Francisco has our numbers. I don't see it. I think Green Bay will win that game. I'm gonna go Tennessee. And what's the last one I'm missing?
Kansas City and Buffalo.
I think it's Buffalo. That's my final pick. What do you got? You got any differences?
Buffalo's rolling, man. Buffalo is rolling. I think Cincinnati gets the upset. I'll go with Cincinnati. and it's really tough to bet against Tom Brady. So I'll go with Tampa, but I like your other two picks. And then finally, FFPC, Jack, we got some sweats hopefully this weekend. Good luck to us there. Any thoughts on playoff challenge? What people are doing, what they're rooting for, just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably need a little more chaos, but I think what do we need? We need Mike Evans and
Elijah Mitchell. Actually, we need some.
yeah, Mitchell. Trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. Too bad we couldn't get one more upset last week, man. Just one more. You know, the field kind of played all favorites and it worked for them. But we'll see what we got after the weekend's over.
The chalk always hits in every fantasy or betting contest type, so never forget. So for Jack at DFS_Magic_, I'm at Brian Jester FF. From Occupy Fantasy, we're from DFS Magic. Appreciate you all listening. Good luck this weekend and enjoy the games.